Today we're going to be doing some sleeper picks for the upcoming 2023 NBA draft, giving some pros and cons on these players, an overview of who they are, and then a few places where it'd be nice for them to be drafted to, and we're going to start with some earlier picks and kind of get more sleeper from there. So first off, let's talk about brother of Keegan, Chris Murray. He's a projected late first round pick currently, and he's a solid shooter, and his volume saw an increase this year, but his percentages went down because he had to create more for himself. I think in the NBA, he's more projected to be a 3-and-D type of player because I think his shot creation still needs that work. He could potentially get there, but I just don't see it being a big part of his game at this current moment. His on-ball creation is just not that great, and I don't think his playmaking is really all that much either. So for an NBA player, I think I see him being an Otto Porter type of player, but probably a bit better on defense, but a bit worse at shooting. So I think he could slot in as a solid 3-and-D guy for many years to come. So two good fits for him. I could see him going to Houston at 20 or Portland at 23. Both of these teams are kind of in dire need of some 3-and-D wing guys. And I think this is the right place to take someone who might not have that huge potential you're looking for in some of your NBA wings, but he could be a nice, cherished role player for years to come. So I think that's a solid late first round pick for him, and I could see him developing into even more if he truly reaches his potential. Next up, let's talk about Nick Smith Jr. He's a former top prospect, but now he's kind of fallen into the late first round, and there are kind of good reasons for this. His shooting was pretty questionable during his time at Arkansas, and so was his decision making. He was projected to be a great shot maker at college, but he just did not come through. However, I think the most NBA ready part of his game right now is his defense actually. He's shown the IQ and the energy on that side, and he has the athleticism and length as a larger guard at 6'4" with a 6'8" wingspan, but he kind of needs to fill out a bit because he's currently kind of lanky. He's gotten some NBA comparisons to Jamal Murray offensively with his off-the-dribble shots, but I actually think he compares better to another Kentucky guard, and that's Emmanuel Quickley. He uses the floater a lot like Quickley, but I think he also needs to be a bit more efficient. I would be looking for him to be a sixth man piece right now. I'm not sure if he'll reach that potential, but I think he could be a good guy off the bench. So I'm going to say a good fit for him would be Brooklyn at 21 or 22, because they have two picks in a row. I think it's a nice landing spot for him because he has some veterans to kind of guide him while he learns the game more. But it's also a team kind of lacking some bench depth, especially at the guard position, because I don't think Cam Thomas is quite all that. So I think he also pairs well next to Cam Thomas. So I think that could be a good landing spot for him. Alright, next up for another person who used to be a consensus top 10 pick but dropped out of it, let's talk about Dariq Whitehead. He had a disappointing season at Duke, and he's now dropped into the late first or even early second round. He has great size for a wing. He's 6'6" with a 6'10" wingspan, and he's shown a good ability to put on muscle, and I think he could actually fill out further because he's still pretty young as well. He's shown some great defensive flashes. He needs to be more consistent at times, though. He would get lost and kind of just not really know where he was on the floor. I think his shooting ability is amazing. He has such a pure stroke. I mean, he can create on or off the ball. He just has that shot. Unfortunately, he's a bit of a black hole on offense. He does not swing the rock, and he averaged more turnovers than assists. So my NBA comparison for him is actually going to be a smaller Michael Porter Jr. He's like a guard version of him, actually. And he has that shooting stroke and the creation abilities, and he has that huge ceiling, but the injuries have kind of held him back from playing. He did not see the court much at Duke, and he had another surgery in the offseason. So we kind of have to see from him if he can stay on the floor, and if he can kind of learn to be more of a team player rather than just himself. I think another great landing spot for Whitehead would be Brooklyn, because I think a wing duo of Bridges and Whitehead could be lethal for years. I think that shooting is really, really nice. So if he's drafted at his peak, I could see him around 21 with Brooklyn. But if he starts to drop more, I think Charlotte at 27 or Indiana at 29 would be great places for him, because I think he fits really nice next to a great playmaker because of how poor he is. I think about like Jokic with MPJ, both of them really nice. So you need a great playmaker next to him. So I think playing with LaMelo Ball or Tyrese Halliburton could be a great thing for his career. So that's my pick, Dariq Whitehead. So now let's talk about Nick Smith Jr.'s teammate, Jordan Walsh. He's currently projected in around the mid-second round, and he's a strong defensive player, but he needs to work more on the offensive side of the ball. He shot below 30% from 3 in college, but he shows some shooting prowess with better than 70% from the free throw line. He's very athletic. He has a reported 41-inch vertical, and I think he could be a good 3-and-D guy, but he's a little bit more of a project than some of these other guys because he's very raw. So my NBA comparison for him is probably someone like Jared Vanderbilt, a more athletic DeMarre Carroll, or kind of like early on Jeremy Grant. These guys were all pretty good athletes, got these bigger bodies. Walsh is already filling out a lot, but they're a little bit more limited offensively. But I think he could be a weapon on defense, so I like him on that side of the ball. A good landing spot for him would be Boston at 35, because I think he has some time to develop his offensive game while being able to hone his defensive skills. And we've seen many guys who were good defenders in college, like Grant Williams, actually show up and succeed in this Boston system. Another good spot, I think, is the Kings at 38 and Portland at 43. Both of these teams have kind of struggled with getting their 3-and-D players. That's why Sacramento took Keegan Murray last year. So I think adding more of those guys will help both of those teams tremendously, although they both might be in the spot where they need more solid players than raw at this time. But I would like them in those systems. The last guy I want to talk about today is Isaiah Wong out of the University of Miami, Florida. He's currently projected to go late second round or even be undrafted. And I want to clarify, this guy's probably not as sure as the other guys because I'm not sure if his game will translate, and we've seen some shot makers struggle who were good in college. But I definitely think he's worth a two-way or a late second. So let's get into him as a player. He was a great shot maker at the college level and a great shooter in general. He had, I think, above 84% from the free throw line. He is that guy when it comes to being a shooter. I kind of see him in the role of like a spark plug off the bench to alleviate NBA benches of their offensive duties. He's not a crazy athlete. I think he's good athletically, but I don't think he's outstanding when it comes to that. And he also is older because he was a senior last year. He's also not that physical. I think he really needs to gain some NBA level bulk to be ready, because he is already slightly undersized, but he is lanky. So I'm going to compare him to either somewhat of like a Lou Williams or maybe even Fred VanVleet coming out of Wichita State. I'll show you their college stats. I think they're kind of comparable players. I think their shot like chart is pretty similar. I think the types of shots they take as well are pretty similar. So I could see him being in that similar role. I'm not saying he'll ever get to an all-star level, but I think like early VanVleet is very similar to Wong right now. So some landing spots I like for Wong could be Memphis at 56. I think the Grizzlies need a little bit more shot making off of their bench. They're getting rid of Brooks. Jaw's going to be suspended for 25 games. They need some guys who can take and make shots, and I think trying out Wong, especially given this late into it, gives them a little bit more depth. They have more depth at forward and big than they do at guard when it comes to their younger players. So I just think it would be a good shot to take. And another good landing spot could be the Cavs at 49. They kind of need a little bit more guard depth, and I think he would be like putting in a much, much, much worse Donovan Mitchell. So I think he could fit in well with that offensive system, because they already built around Mitchell, and Mitchell's a smaller guard just like Wong. I think Mitchell's better, obviously, but, similar types of players. So I think either the Cavs or the Grizzlies would be a great spot for Isaiah Wong. Alright, I hope y'all enjoyed. Obviously, this is a bit of speculation based on some of the limited scouting I've done. Most of these comparisons are more about the type of player they are and how they play rather than the level that they would achieve, so don't assume if I make a comparison I think they'll be at that level. But now the only thing we have to do is look forward to the draft. Peace.